The sudden crack of a bomb startled the anxious young soldiers sitting in formation inside the C-47 aircraft and propelled Lieutenant Dick Winters into action. Shrapnel from the exploded shell rattled off the front of the plane like hailstones. Outside in the night sky, Lieutenant Winters could see other paratrooper planes bobbing and weaving between puffs of smoke and rapid gunfire. The surprise attack was not a surprise anymore, which only meant one thing. It was time. It was their time. At 26 years of age, Lieutenant Winters was commanding officer of Easy Company, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division in the United States Army. And on that unforgettable night of June 6, 1944, with their parachutes packed, standing at the doorstep of history, one jump into the greatest war would turn the leaders of the Easy Company into legends. Before the plane could reach their target drop zone, a bullet struck the pilot, which threw the plane into a violent descent. There was no time for moving speeches or strategic instruction. It was time to act. And as the leader of Easy Company, Lieutenant Winters was to be the first one out that door. In those final seconds, the young lieutenant's words and thoughts turned to Henry V. From this day to the ending of time, we in it shall be remembered. We gallant few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he who gives his life for me shall be my brother. He threw himself into the violent night. In the most prolific war in history, during the most famous invasion in history, the boys of Easy Company went from leaders of the most elite division in the armed services to legends. The theme for this year's conference is From Leaders to Legends. And just as those historic leaders from Easy Company accepted the challenge to become the most elite unit in the armed forces and lead the United States to victory for the sake of each person sitting in this room and for future generations, my hope is that each one of you will accept the challenge to become the most elite company in healthcare for the sake of all the people working for us right now and all the people we serve. So maybe one day, years from now, people will be talking about the legendary company of ViaQuest who changed their life forever. 56 years after the end of the World War II, the men of Easy Company reunited to tell their story in the award-winning biopic, Band of Brothers. Their incredible story starts in the foothills of Georgia at Camp Toccoa in 1942. The Army had just sanctioned the formation of an experimental company within the infamous 101st Airborne Division when a bus arrives carrying a group of doughy-eyed young recruits ready to start their brutal 24-week training. As one young face after another steps off that bus, you begin to realize that these are not a group of young men from privileged childhoods They were farmers and coal workers, mountain men and sons of the Great South, but all shared an immense love for their country and a determination to change the world. At the center of Camp Toccoa was the towering 1,700-foot Mount Currahee, a Cherokee term that means stands alone, which would become their battle cry for the rest of their lives. We stand alone, together. While other units were afforded weekend passes, recreational activities, and a less strenuous physical training, the boys of Easy Company could be heard day or night making that vicious run of Mount Currahee, 3 miles up, 3 miles down. There's a scene inside the HBO biopic where the camera scans the pitch black barracks with soldiers lying in their beds with the look of relief on their face. As the background, you could hear the soldiers from Easy Company bellowing. What are we running? Currahee. What does Currahee mean? Stands alone. How far up? 3 miles up, 3 miles down. What company are we? Easy Company. What do we do? Stand alone. Those brutal late night runs washed out soldiers who did not have the will and determination to be the best, while it served as a touchstone for the boys that would eventually make up Easy Company. They knew they would be called to extraordinary feats. Now, they only had each other. They stood alone, together. I'm not about to stand up here tonight and say that anything we have experienced or anything we will ever experience compares to those legendary leaders of Easy Company. The Second World War is the largest single event in human history, fought across 6 of the 7 continents and all of its oceans. The physical scope of the war, the political consequences, and the cost of humanity are unprecedented today, earning them the rightful honor as the greatest generation. But make no mistake, the blood of the greatest generation flows through each one of us tonight, and their example and character help shape this company, and we owe it to them to become the most elite company in healthcare. Camp Toccoa molded boys from all walks of life into men and created a bond that could never be broken. The band of brothers would not back down of reaching their goal of becoming the best unit in the United States Army when everybody else was out having fun. They would not retreat when they were forced to run to the point of exhaustion. And they would not relent when they were pushed to the point of breaking mentally, because they knew their brothers counted on them and the fate of America was in their hands. The past 14 years has served as our Camp Toccoa. In 1999, our owner at the time, Mike Levinson, suffered a brain injury that eventually took his life. But we did not back down. and ViaQuest was born as a result. In 2002 and 2010, separate government agencies tried to force us to put the people we serve out in the streets and use the media as leverage. But we did not relent, and they are being served happily in their homes this evening. In 2008, a company that we built together and managed was sold out from underneath us. Our lender swept the cash out of our account and shut down our line of credit. But we did not relent, and we are stronger because of it. The blood of Easy Company flows through each one of us, and every time we have been challenged, we have risen to the occasion. Every time the person sitting next to you has stumbled to fall, you have been there to pick them up. And every time the people we serve has needed you, you have been there for them. It is just like we have been running that infamous mountain together. Who are we fighting for? The people we serve. Who are we? Leaders. What company is this? ViaQuest. What do we do? Stand alone. As of tonight, our training is over, and we need to engage in the battle of excellence, because every person we serve and every person working for you tonight is counting on you. The biopic picks up with Lieutenant Winters hitting the ground on D-Day, only to find out that 18 of his men died in the air. 65 were casualties of war, and only 13 landed with him on their intended target. As a leader, he knew the Allied forces were counting on him. So he and those 13 brave soldiers took out 65 Germans to complete their mission, giving the Allied forces a critical victory. In combat, the reward for a job well done is, did you get that next tough mission? And over the course of the next 6 months, Easy Company kept getting those tough missions, overcoming enemy forces in the face of overwhelming odds due to their amazing drive and determination. Wounded soldiers would discharge themselves from hospitals just to get back to their units because they did not want to let their brothers down, as the legend of Easy Company spread throughout the European campaign. In December of 1944, Easy Company was set to go on a well-deserved and extended leave in Paris when they received news that would change the course of history. Hitler surprised the Allies by launching his final offensive attack in an attempt to split the Allies and keep themselves from supplying themselves. If successful, the attack would seal the fate of the Allies and give Hitler his goal of ruling the world. This would be the biggest single battle on the Western Front in World War II, in a small town called Bastogne, famously known as the Battle of the Bulge. General Eisenhower quickly made a call without consulting anyone, which was entirely against Army protocol. The 101st Airborne Division would be charged with the task of holding the line. An Easy Company would lead that charge. The fate of the world rested in the hands of a bunch of ragtag soldiers. When they were notified of their orders, there was complete silence until Sergeant Lipton yelled at the top of his voice, "Currahee," to the wild applause of his brothers. In one of the most riveting scenes in the HBO series, you see Easy Company packed like animals in the back of a truck driving to the front line. When the orders came down, they had no time to grab winter clothes. Very few had weapons, and ammunition was scarce. These young men were on the doorsteps of the most violent battle in history, lacking the most basic necessities. Yet the only thing on their mind was victory. The truck stops a few kilometers outside of the city of Bastogne. Easy Company jumps out to form two columns for the march into the city, one on each side of the road. You could see their breath in the freezing air as they marched on with determination. All of a sudden, in the distance, came a sea of defeated American troops fleeing from the front in disarray. They were panicked, staggering, exhausted, shouting, "Run, run! They will murder you. They will kill you. They have everything, tanks, guns, air power, everything." The members of Easy Company looked at them with disgust as they stripped them of every coat, helmet, and rifle they could find. Years later, in an interview, Lieutenant Winters would simply say the retreating soldiers were pathetic. The camera closes in on Easy Company, still standing in two columns in the middle of the road, looking back at the thousands of retreating soldiers, wearing a look of disbelief on their face. The two columns slowly turned to where they're standing face to face, looking into the eyes of their brothers. In complete silence, trying to take in everything they had just seen or heard. At that moment, no words were necessary. They knew that the person standing in front of them would gladly take their life for them, and they would do the same. Suddenly, Lieutenant Winters screams, "Easy Company, roll out." They turn toward Bastogne and begin their lonely march as the music fades and the silhouettes of retreating soldiers vanishes in the background. They stood alone, together. That scene moved me beyond words. Tired, wounded, and ready for Paris, those young men received word that they were needed at the front of the war in the dead of winter. They didn't ask why. They didn't complain. They simply jumped into action. Their country needed them. Their brothers needed them, and they defiantly refused to disappoint. In 2007, the management team of ViaQuest Home Health in Pittsburgh orchestrated a walkout and called the Department of Health on the way out. The task was too tough, and they were retreating. We had no revenue, no staff, and impending sanctions. But what we did have was Dina Bear, Patty Gordon, and Lisa Blum, driving to the front to hold the line. Over time, they were joined by new leaders ready to fight. Sally O'Brien, Sherry Lynn Hart, Darren Arnold, Teresa Kiefer, and Carrie Closick. In 2009, the leaders of ViaQuest Hospice in Pittsburgh decided to leave and start a competing agency to drive us out of business. She thought she had won. But we had Jessica Pop and Jeanette Swaney driving to the front to join their band of sisters. As they stood in the streets, standing face to face, you could see the columns being filled by the likes of Jenny Kennedy, Erica Morrison, and Audrey Sadler. One by one, new leaders emerged to join them into their march of victory. They had no notice, no time to prepare, and competitors attacking at every turn. They didn't complain. They didn't ask why. They simply jumped into action to win. Easy Company had Dick Winters as their leader, their biggest brother. When the war ended in 1945, Sergeant Talbert was still in the hospital when he wrote these words: "Dick, you are loved and will never be forgotten by any soldier who has served under you, or shall I say with you, because that's how you led. I just want you to know that I love you and I would follow you into hell." Those words very well could have been spoken about our own Lieutenant Winters, Lori Lasowski. She always leads from the front. Leads by example. Never willing to let her team down. And I can tell you, Lori, that you are loved and you will never be forgotten. By anyone who has served with you. And I can tell each one of you tonight that we would not be here without that fearless and brave team in Pittsburgh. Our very own Easy Company. They stand alone together. Band of Brothers picks up with Easy Company sitting in foxholes in the woods, looking out over a field that slopes down to the village of Foy, which was the central target in Battle of the Bulge. It was snowing, a soft, dry snow that piled up to 12 inches. The temperature fell to well below zero. The men were colder than they had ever been in their lives. They only had their jump boots and trench coats, no wool socks, no long underwear. They wrapped their bodies in blankets and their boots in burlap. In town, the hospital was packed, and a young corporate asks, "Why aren't we evacuating anybody?" The medic's response still lives in infamy. "Haven't you heard? The boys of Easy Company are surrounded. Those poor bastards. Easy Company was surrounded by hundreds of Germans with tanks, guns, and heavy artillery, and no way out. Yet it was reported years later that the medic was actually talking about the Germans who were poor bastards, because he knew the will of Easy Company, and they would not let their brothers down. From December 16th, 1944 to January 25th, 1945, the men of Easy Company were surrounded by Germans who knew exactly where they were, and they launched the most vicious attack in history. For 40 straight days, Easy Company held the line against German artillery that should have annihilated them within hours, until reinforcements could come and drive the Germans out, which proved to be the turning point of the war and a turning point for America. When the smoke cleared, the Battle of the Bulge would be the bloodiest battle in history, costing 100,000 soldiers their lives on both sides. Years later, a reporter asked Lieutenant Welsh how they survived all those days of constantly being attacked. Lieutenant Welsh looked at the reporter with astonishment. We didn't go there to fear. We didn't go there to die. We went there to win. They stood alone, together. These past few years, it has felt like we have been surrounded, under constant attack. But the leaders in this room did not come here to fear. We did not come here to fail. We came here to win, and we will not give up. We will not give in. We will fight for the people we serve. We will fight for our staff, and we will fight for each other. When a dishonest employee and an unethical agency conspired to steal our business to shut us down, Reagan Evelyn, Lori Beekler, Letitia Smith-Avant, and Aubrey Varner said, "Not on my watch." For months, they were constantly attacked, but they stood and fought for the people we serve and for each one of us. They held the line for each one of us. Kathy Richard accepted the challenge to relocate and take over home health and hospice in Ohio, knowing that we were losing a great deal of money on a monthly basis. We had no operational procedures in place, and her team was in flux. But she held the line and would not give in. She would not let us fail. Our West region was in disarray. We were being scrutinized by every county that we served. We were short-staffed and on the verge of closing our doors. When Angie Cheon said, "Send me, I will hold the line and move us to victory." Other agencies said, "Those people are too tough to serve," or "I need more time to prepare." But Angie would not offer up any excuses. She simply took action. Day in and day out, our maintenance team of Ben Wimmers, Harold Kinnear, Robert Joyce, and Dave Haller respond to one crisis after another. Not one of these men came from this industry, yet they serve as if they did. They don't ask why. They don't complain. Just like those heroes of Easy Company, they simply take action and get the job done with will and determination. As the war was winding down in April of 1945, Lieutenant Winters dispatched a platoon to patrol the woods south of a town in Bavaria, looking for German soldiers who were taking refuge in the countryside. The men slowly made their way through the woods, jumping at the prospect of being ambushed at any moment. They could see a clearing straight ahead, and each man took his position while Sergeant Perconti pushed away the brush and stepped into the light. Suddenly, each man stopped dead in their tracks with a look of shock and confusion on their face. When Lieutenant Winters finally arrived, he instantly smelled the foul stench, which he quickly identified as burnt flesh. The boys of Easy Company were standing face to face with hundreds of emaciated men, separated only by the thin veil of a locked chain-link fence. The look on the faces of the prisoners was one of doom. They watched their friends die, and surely these soldiers were there to finish off the job. The soldiers tried to make eye contact with the prisoners, but they dropped their eyes and lowered their heads, much like a whipped dog who has been beaten. Lieutenant Winters ordered the locks to be cut, and as the soldiers walked through that fence, the skeletal bodies parted like the Red Sea. It was at that moment that they realized these soldiers were not there to kill them. They were there to save them. The feeling of relief was so overwhelming that many dropped to the ground and began to cry uncontrollably. Others grabbed the soldiers and embraced them with all of their might, crying in their arms, thanking them for saving their life. One by one, soldiers emerged from huts throughout the camp, some carrying their friends in their arms who were too weak to walk. All of them crying, praising God, and thanking the United States of America. They were free at last. The rugged, brave heroes of Easy Company could not hold it in any longer and began to cry as uncontrollably as the men clutching them. It was a scene that would be burned in their memories forever. Americans, Germans, Czechs, Poles, soldiers, prisoners, brothers, embracing each other without insecurity or embarrassment, but for love of humankind. They were free at last. Lieutenant Winters looked around the camp with tears flowing freely down his face as he muttered, "Now I know I'm here." I hope each one of you know why you're here. You have cut the chains and freed every single person we serve. Society had given up on those prisoners and left them for dead, but they were saved. Society has given up on many of the people we serve, but each one of you has saved them. Brian was confined to a wheelchair his entire life, and now he walks freely and is tough to keep up with, all because of the determined staff of our South region. It was a Saturday evening when we received the call that James health was declining. And it was at that time our promise needed to be fulfilled. He simply wanted a reassuring friend, a back rub, a pillow adjusted, a hand held. In the final moment of his life, James was free, all because of the brave and humble staff of Hospice North. When Lauren first attended our day services, she could not be left alone. She had no self-esteem and was self-conscious about her disabilities. Today, Lauren lives independently, has a job, and faces each day with confidence and hope. All because of our staff in Painesville who would not give up on her and would fight for her freedom. When Tammy started with clinical services, she suffered from such anxiety that she was completely dependent upon her guardian. Today, Tammy is anxiety-free, lives independently, and has a job. She is free. To these people and so many more, you are already legends. I hope you know why you're here. Every 2 years after the end of the war, the band of brothers would get together to reminisce, pay tribute to their fallen brothers, laugh, and oftentimes cry. As the reunions became well known, people would travel from all over the world to simply tell those legends, "Thank you for saving my father, brother, mother, sister." People from liberated countries like Holland and Poland would describe in eerie detail how Easy Company marched into their town and saved them, while the prisoners from that concentration camp tried to express their appreciation. But no words would come, just tears of gratefulness and love. For long moments at a time, Easy Company and their families would sit in the audience, looking into the eyes of these former prisoners. The only sound would be that of quiet sobs, but no words were necessary. To all of you, my band of brothers, I envision a day when we get together many years from now to remember the great things you have done and the great things you are about to do. There will be reminiscing, laughing, and yes, a few tears. There will be long lines as far as the eye can see of people lining up to say thank you for saving their father, brother, mother, sister, for keeping them safe, for giving them hope, for giving them a life, for loving them. And no words will be necessary. The very last scene of Band of Brothers is an interview with Dick Winters. He tells the story of how his grandson climbs into his lap and says, "Grandpa, are you a hero?" Moments pass as he tries to compose himself, and he says, "No. But I served in a company of heroes. When I reach my final resting place, that's what will be on my gravestone. I served in a company of heroes. We stand alone together." Thank you.